Let's speak with Elliot Keck first, Head of Campaigns at the Taxpayers Alliance. What you always hope for, Elliot, is just a scintilla of, not so much a little bit of a dividend repayment for the taxpayer somewhere along the line. Well, whatever they're doing, at least it's going to be better for us. And now we learn it might be just as bad or even worse.
Well, good afternoon, Ian. Listen, the fundamental problem with our water industry is that much of our pipes, much of our water system is still Victorian in basis. And what that essentially means that is rainwater and sewage all goes into the same pipes. And that means that when it rains too much, you simply have a problem that either it's going to come out of your sink or of your toilet, or it's going to have to be pumped into the rivers, the lakes, the sea, etc. That is the fundamental problem. And in order to fix that, in order to change our pipes so that rainwater and sewage go into different places, that's going to cost an absolutely vast amount of money. And that will have to be paid for either through taxes or through higher water bills. So if we want cleaner rivers, cleaner lakes, cleaner waterways, all of that, which I think most people do, the fundamental reality is that over the next 5, 10, 15 years, we are going to have to pay more for it.
And this is the fundamental problem. I had a water leak at my house, which went on for ages, trying to find it, establish it, how bad was it, etc. And when the fella came out to fix it, I had a fascinating conversation with him. He said, by the way, do you know that the water company will give you 250 quid for getting this fixed? It was one of those the insurance company didn't want to know because they somehow managed to get out of it on a technicality. Nonetheless, so we paid the bill. But he said the water company will give you 250 quid because what you've done is replace something. You're a tiny part of a bigger jigsaw, of course, where the entire town technically needs replacing. And, of course, that's replicated, Elliot, as you've been alluding to, right across the country.
Yeah, and so when we're talking about getting rid of Ofwat, we have to ask what's actually going to come next. And we're hearing this talk of this super regulator. And what Ofwat have basically said to water companies over the last 25 to 30 years, more or less, what they've said time and time again is they don't want bills to go up. They don't want costs to go up for consumers. And that's because they thought the priority for consumers was lower bills. And that's why bills have been broadly gone up lower than inflation over the last 25, 30 years. But that has also meant that there hasn't been enough money for investment. And if one thing that did happen about 10, 15 years ago is we started attaching monitors to all of those pipes where, you know, the storm overflows, i.e. raw sewage, gets discharged into our waterways. Previously, we didn't really have any monitors on them, so we didn't know how bad the problem was. About 10 years ago, we added monitors to pretty much all of them. Now we know that there is this big problem. People want it fixed. But listen, as I said, someone's going to have to pay for that, and that's going to either come from taxes or from bills.
Indeed, no other way around it. Listen, great to have you on with us. Elliot, as ever, thank you. Elliot Keck, Head of Campaigns at the Taxpayers Alliance. I think the problem with all of this, if they weren't polluting stuff, like lobbing gunk and poop into rivers, and then charging us a fortune, but then giving bonuses to bosses and the like, you think, how do you get a bonus if you've simultaneously been fined for pollution? I mean, if you're a water company, you've got one job, really, and that's to maintain and deliver clean and healthy water. So if you're rumbled doing the pollutant thing by shoving God knows how much gunk into the sea or the river, then, yeah, you might think you'd be in serious trouble. You wouldn't be getting a bonus anytime soon. Vince says, Ian, privatisation of utilities was under Blair, not Thatcher. Sold water for 700 million, gave gas, electric away on the promise it would be cheaper with a big lie. I think you slightly missed what I said, Vince. I was talking about the concept of not specifically water. When Thatcher talked about privatisation, she didn't have that in mind, that heads of boards of directors would be trousering huge bonuses while failing to deliver the service they were charged with delivering. But you're quite right. Blair didn't shine himself under any glory when it came to privatisation either. And certainly that same promise is going to be cheaper and it's going to be better. And sometimes it is. Telecoms are cheaper and better. I'm sure there's somebody out there pointing to their radio going, no, not much. You see my bill. But then you throw in things like broadband now, which we never used to have, right? This one comes in from Stuart, who's in Wigan, referenced the issue of our politicians. Can we just reflect how irrelevant Kemi Badenoch and the Tories are? Kemi was your 3 p.m. news bulletin and once again reminded me, A, they exist, and B, they're simply not part of the political conversation that concern the British public. It's simply bizarre how irrelevant the Tories are. surely there would be more defections. That is true, but they are still His Majesty's official opposition. Hence the reason why they still hoover up a certain amount of headlines. Let's get a word back on the issue of water. Paul Pousland is a barrister and for Lawyers for Nature. Good afternoon to you, Paul.
Good afternoon.
Nice to have you. I mean, if you're a barrister for Lawyers for Nature, I guess your inbox is a fairly busy one on a regular basis, looking at the behaviour of some of our water companies.
There are a lot of sewage spills and illegal activity going on our waterways all the time, yes.
Yeah. Am I too cynical here in thinking, because I'd like to think that the people that sit around these impressive boards of water companies, men and women with very impressive salaries and rather curious impressive bonuses, we'll come to that in a moment, they're not stupid. So if you said to them, is it okay to dump a load of sewage into the river or the sea, I'm pretty sure if you were having a beer with them in the local pub, they'd go, no, that's a terrible idea. But of course that is exactly what's been happening, and I think the smart money says, and not accidentally, many of these knew exactly what they were doing.
Indeed, and the whole system is set up so that these spills happen. We have set up private companies whose entire object is to make as much money as they can within the law, or what they can get away with within the law. And therefore, if we don't enforce the law against them, they are going to spill sewage. Because it's a simple question. On my river where I live, there are dozens of illegal outfalls that will cost tens of millions of pounds to fix. So the water company can either send that money to their shareholders or nothing happens to them. Yeah. Whereas if they were prosecuted for those, then there would be another incentive to be weighed in the balance. And I'm pretty sure a lot of those outfalls would get fixed much more quickly.
Well, you might think so, and of course, just to compound the misery of all of this, Paul, this is no news to you, of course, what tends to happen is the head honchos of these companies actually get a bonus for their troubles. You'd think, you know, many people, a colleague of mine on a TV programme a couple of years ago said, look, if you run one of these companies and you put stuff into rivers and seas that really isn't meant to be there, and a 6-year-old could tell you that, then you should frankly go to jail, because the crime is so grave, it's so horrendous, and so, you know, potentially fatal in extreme cases, that you should probably go to prison. These guys end up with a bonus and a second home in Barbados. I mean, that surely, I said at the beginning, I don't even think Thatcher, when she thought of the concept of privatisation, had this kind of thing in mind.
Indeed, and to be honest, prison is one thing, but I would take even just the Environment Agency prosecuting each and every single illegal sewage spill that there is and fining the company for that. Yeah. And obviously, in order to do that, we need to know where this sewage is coming in. It is a shocking but true fact. On probably every river in the country, there is sewage going in that the authorities don't even know about. They don't even survey. So on my river, the Environment Agency has not for 30 years actually surveyed the river. So when I just walked up the river, I was finding over and over again illegal sewage going straight into the river, which the Environment Agency had no idea about. So when you see all these things saying, you know, sewage has increased by 60%, that's the sewage we know about. Yeah. I think if the government sent out teams onto every river in the country to actually find out the true picture, I think we would be utterly shocked about what's actually going on there.
Here's what I don't get, Paul. You know, I'm a fairly simple character. I don't mean intelligently. I mean just the basics of life, and there's some areas that, you know, I'm pretty good at knowing the knowledge of, and there's other areas I'm not so good at. But when it comes to this sort of area, I'd have imagined if you are the Environment Agency, I'm not saying you only have one job, but it's sort of in that ballpark of, you know, if you can't check whether somebody is polluting your rivers, then something's gone badly wrong.
Yes, it has. I mean, to some extent, the Environment Agency has been underfunded, but it also does show a real lack of will, because, of course, prosecutions, they can recover the cost of these from the water companies. So it would actually be self-funding. If the government just said to them, today, you are to prosecute every single sewage spill, we'll give you a starter fund to start that happening. But once the ball is rolling, the prosecution costs would fund it themselves. They could do it. And it does feel like a real lack of will on the part of the Environment Agency. A few years ago, I found a completely illegal sewage spill happening on my river. Told the Environment Agency they did nothing. So I had to personally, in my spare time as a volunteer, campaign to have it fixed. 4 years later, that's been done, but the Environment Agency did nothing for it.
Wow.
And if the Environment Agency isn't doing that, what are they doing? What is the point of them?
So on balance, over the last decades, shall we say, Paul, has this whole polluting thing got worse? Is it sort of is it about the same? What's the deal?
I think it's Probably about the same, but we are starting to get a better picture of it because it's being monitored, and river guardians are going out there and doing the Environment Agency's job for them in actually finding these outfalls. A lot of stuff I'm finding on my river is just effectively Victorian infrastructure that has just broken over time and has never been fixed. And actually, it probably should have been fixed 15, 20 years ago, but the money that should have fixed it was sent to Thames main shareholder Macquarie Bank, and that's long gone out of the country now. So the question of who actually is going to fund the repairs that should have happened some time ago is a difficult one. But the answer is not to hand even more money to shareholders and senior management rather than fixing the problem.
Yeah, it's a confused picture, but it should be quite a simple one, really, to unravel. But let's not hold our breath on that. Listen, Paul, thank you for your time, sir. I really appreciate that. Paul Powsland, barrister of Lawyers for Nature. I didn't even know that group existed, but kind of makes sense. You know, you want to look after stuff and you want some impressive characters on your side. It's one of those areas where I think you'd back the lawyers and say, you know, I mean, come on, you're a water company. It goes back to the pothole example, doesn't it? You know, it's not the biggest issue in our land. In fact, polluting seas and rivers is bigger. But these things are hugely symbolic of the malaise that underpins so much of our society. And if we've reached this point in the 21st century where we can't make a road worthy of travelling on, and we can't function without polluting our rivers with human excrement and God knows what else, then we failed. You know, back in the day when people used to go to the loo by sticking their backside out of a window straight into the Thames, if you'd asked those people then, what will it look like in 2025? They'd go, oh yeah, none of this, it'd be lovely. You know, you'd be able to sort of drink from the Thames, everything will be beautiful. They'll have refined it and civilised the whole structure. We're kind of back there. We're kind of back there.